There is no shame in starting again. It doesn't matter how long you've been traveling in a particular direction. If that direction is wrong for you, then surely the opportunity to turn around and try something different is worthwhile relative to considering doing something that only serves to cause you pain or discomfort. I came across a quote a few years ago, and I don't know who it's attributed to, but it's something along those lines. If you've been traveling in the wrong direction for a very long time, you can still turn around, or something to that effect. And I've applied that logic, or at least I've applied the reverse of that logic in relationships for most of my adult life. Now, since I can remember the very first relationship I found myself in up until quite recently, I was in what I would consider to be codependent relationships. I was looking for that person to make me healthy, to make me happy, to make me complete or whole, or to fix whatever gaps or missing pieces there were in my life. And then finding myself disappointed when at some point in the relationship I arrived at the realization that that just wasn't going to happen. And so I'd repeat the cycle, but not before I had to go through this really uncomfortable process of witnessing in real time the dissolution of a relationship, but also feeling the reluctance to change because I knew that I would have to start everything from scratch. I'd have to start over again and go through that whole process of getting to know someone and putting my stuff in storage, or moving somewhere and finding a new job, and all of the things that look like obstacles in the moment. As I reflect on it from a different perspective, I find myself casting my mind back at those times and being aware of the amount of shame and embarrassment and pride that I had that kept me from making those decisions, because I didn't want to feel like a failure. I didn't want to appear as a failure in the eyes of other people. The reality was I was living as someone who was a failure, and so if you live with the identity of being a failure, then, well, everything kind of has to take its natural course in that way. And of course, that's something that has since changed as well. But there are so many times in my life that I've hesitated to take action. I've hesitated to do something that I knew was right for me because of the sense of shame that's come with it. And even sharing these videos of personal accounts and personal stories, there is a sense underneath, a very mild sense of, well, I shouldn't be doing this because what will people think of me? For those of you out there who find yourselves in a similar situation where you don't feel like things are working out, and you have a sense that there is something more, you have a sense that there is something different available to you, but you don't necessarily know how to access it because it's veiled behind this wall of doubt and shame and fear, and it says, well, if you go in that direction, what if it doesn't work out? Surely you should stick with the thing that you have, because the thing that you have, it might not be great, it might not be perfect, but it's good enough, right? And you can try and convince yourself that it's good enough a few times, but deep down there is still a sense of, this is not right for me, and I have to at some point make a change. There's another quote that comes to mind, and I haven't researched this, and it's going to be quite evident in this video, but change happens when the fear of change is less than the fear of staying the same. I'm going to have to check that one out when I'm editing this video and make sure that's right. But yeah, when the fear of change is less than the fear of staying the same, we are compelled to make changes in our lives. And most recently, I attended a 3-day free webinar event, which was hosted by Tony Robbins. It was a couple of weeks ago now, and I've been reflecting on this for a couple of weeks since, hence not feeling too inclined to make a video until today. And one of the things that I really took away from that is just how easy it is for us to get stuck in patterns, even if we know or we recognize at some level a pattern is happening. And human beings are great at finding patterns. We're great at seeing links where there may not actually be links, and we're also great at making links between things in our own lives and seeing them playing out in real time. And I notice for me there's been this feeling of stuck and trapped, and that's a feeling that I've been living with probably most of my life for at least 30 years. And I realized on this webinar, and it was a free event, and so I had nothing to lose by taking a look at that. I just realized how easy it is for us to get stuck in these cycles. I say us, really what I mean is me. I'm trying to deflect it slightly, but I'm just going to bring it back to myself again here, because I've been that person for so many years who has woken up and it's like, oh, I don't really feel like doing this today. I don't really feel like doing that. That must be a sign that it's not something that I should be doing, rather than persisting and seeing it through to completion. I've had a tendency to give up on things, even if they may have led somewhere beneficial. And it hasn't occurred to me that at the same time, I've also spent a large part of my adult life relatively inactive. Like many people, I've had a desk job, so I've been sitting down a lot of the time. I haven't been a particular fan of physical exercise, and thankfully that's also something that's changed since the beginning of this year. And just recognizing how much self-consciousness there is in doing something differently for the first time and not knowing what the result will be is enormous. Whether that's making videos like this, whether it's having the courage to leave an environment, whether that's a work environment or a relationship or something similar that just isn't serving you, that you also cannot serve to your fullest degree. And not having that sense of disempowerment, that you've failed in some way and that you have to convince everybody that there's a good and logical reason for you taking the actions that you've taken. And even as I'm saying this, I'm finding myself just thinking, wow, like, we get so tangled up in our stories, we get so tangled up in the things that we believe. And how often is it the case that all of us try to change the external world without looking at the one that's creating that world? And the world that we live in is what it is. You know, it has good and it has bad in equal measure. There is contrast everywhere we look. And we can focus on the lack, and we can focus on the absence, and we can focus on the bad and the negative, and it may be that it appears that there is an overwhelming amount of that, perhaps because we're already tuned into it really well. But there's also so much good. There is so much love and joy and peace and happiness surrounding us. But just because it's not being shouted about from the rooftops or shared on the news or on social media, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And more importantly, it exists primarily inside of us. It is our nature. And I find myself in lower moments, or I have found myself in lower moments, looking back at the course of my life. And I'm 39 years old now, and I think, wow, I've wasted so much of my life not doing things that I wish I could have done at that point, and that opportunity has passed, or it's changed form in some way. And then I think to myself, well, as a result of having all of the experiences I've had, I find myself at a point today where largely the things that people think about me aren't of interest to me. I'm not seeking anybody's approval. I don't need anything from anybody else. But that doesn't mean it's not nice to have, it's not nice to receive. There's no dependency on it. If someone doesn't validate my actions or like my videos or give me encouraging comments, it doesn't detract from the experience. And there's an enormous amount of freedom that comes with that. And all of us have access to that freedom, but we so seldom look for it that it appears only to be available for a select few. for those people who have been born into lucky families, or who have a huge amount of wealth, or who are fortunate enough to be able to afford really expensive coaches, or whatever the story is. But that simply isn't true. And I feel like I'm going off on a bit of a ramble here, but I'm going to continue going because I think it's so important that we recognize the value of our own perspective, and how much that perspective can cause us to move confidently in the direction of the things that we want. But equally, it can hold us back, and it can keep us locked in this pattern of fear. It can keep us in some ways literally locked inside our houses, or trapped in lives which aren't fulfilling us. And I don't think anybody out there truly believes that their purpose is to be chained to a desk 5 days a week for 40 or 50 years. I don't believe that anybody out there truly believes that their purpose or their reason for being on this earth in a human body is to experience poverty or suffering, or to experience hardship. But so many people are exposed to that, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to transform it into something meaningful, or into something that represents a growth opportunity. And that's not my way of trying to justify anything that's happening as okay. But if we take the labels out of the equation for a moment, we just give ourselves permission to look at the course of our lives as they are, the times that have arisen when we could have taken a different course of action, but didn't, because that voice inside said, you shouldn't do that. That's not right for you. You're going to fail. You don't deserve it. You should stick this one out because there's no one else out there that will love you more, or love you at all. Or there's no one else out there that will pay you this much. Or there's no one else out there that's going to be your friend. So you're just going to have to settle for the stuff that you have, right? And I can't keep this type of sharing entirely to myself without offering some form of invitation to you as a viewer to spend some time looking at your own life, not necessarily just on the outside, but on the inside. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? What is the story that you believe to be true about the world? And has that story always been the case? Has that story been with you from the day that you were born, from the first thought that you can remember having it up until now? Or has that story evolved? Was it a better story or a worse story at some point? And has it changed? And what changed it for you? And what would happen if it changed again in a more favorable way? And all of us out there who are compelled to share videos, or to share content, or to share stories of this kind, really, I believe we go through these experiences to share with other people the understanding that experience doesn't have to crush us. It doesn't have to kill us. It doesn't have to end our lives. It doesn't have to be something that narrows us down and contracts us into these fearful states. It can be an invitation. It can be an opportunity for us to change. It can be an opportunity for us to reflect and just to take a moment and go, is this something I've seen before? And is it something I want to see again? And even if it's not something that you've seen before, you can still ask yourself that question. And then it opens up this doorway of possibility that starts to unfold in lots of weird and wonderful ways, at least in my case, where you look back over the course of life and you think, wow, why did I ever make that choice? Why did I ever do that? I'd never do that again. I'd never find myself again in that position. And feeling an enormous sense of gratitude for the amount of progress, the amount of change, the amount of novelty and difference that has been experienced in that process, and also having a sense of eagerness and excitement and anticipation for what comes next, because wherever you are in the course of your life, the next moment, the next day, the next month, the next year could be so totally different from anything you've previously experienced. If you start looking at life in that way and asking yourself those questions and inviting yourself just to reflect on how is it that I'm living my life? What kind of story am I telling myself, and how is that playing out? And maybe I could change that story. And you don't have to know how right now. It's not about knowing the how, it's just about knowing what am I working with? Where am I right now? What's my stake in the ground? What's my starting point? And as you start to embark upon this process of change, the means become evident. A book will appear, a conversation will happen, a video will pop up, a quote will just appear in your life somehow, or some other event will happen, and it will just resonate with wherever you are at that point in your journey. And so I started by talking about shame and the fear of change, and ending with the possibility of change. And for me, that's a real-time demonstration of how one individual can go through both sides of the coin, if you like. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't things that I don't still experience that way and go, "Whoa, that's a big step. Maybe I need to prepare myself for that." But the bar is so much higher than it used to be, and it could be so much higher still. But ultimately, where I am is good. Who I am is good. And to me, that's the most important. So I hope there's some value in that, and look forward to sharing some more stories going forwards. Thanks for watching.